Wednesday morning. A Wednesday morning. Wednesday morning. Sound like Anchorman right there.
Yeah.
Try to get your syllables in before we have to start.
Oh, wait, I should do those.
I've made a huge mistake where I have now not gotten myself a cup of coffee before, or I haven't topped up my coffee before the
Yeah.
start of this, but we're here. We're weird, but we're on the way.
Great.
What's up, Calvin? How you doing?
Yep.
Happy Wednesday
Pretty
to
good.
you.
Pretty good. I'm doing all right, other than this moth infestation happening throughout all of our state. Apparently, everyone just has random gigantic moths like this big just flying around their houses.
Yeah, Calvin hit me up with this morning, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then all of a sudden, I was like, "Yeah, last night I got hit with a big old moth
Yep.
flying out of my cupboard over there as well too." Like, for fuck's sake, well, I didn't think anything of it. It was just the one, obviously, but like, still, I was like, "Hey, leave me alone, moth." Now I'm gonna be on the lookout,
Yep.
spray bottling things for sure.
I don't know how they get in, man. These things, if it was small, it'd be okay, but these things are like probably the largest moths I've seen
It
ever.
was definitely big.
So,
It flew
yeah.
out like a pterodactyl for sure. It's just like, oh my god, just came out of nowhere.
Yes. Yes.
No, my gosh. But you mean, look, the spring has sprung. We've had torrential downpour rain for the last couple of days. I don't know if that's been hitting you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like we, had some crazy flooding kind of stuff. Like 36 was hydroplaning center. Cars were just flying off the road at one point there a couple of days. So
I bet.
yeah, I mean, it's nice. It's nice now though because everything's so green, and we'll get it for a little bit of time, and then everything's gonna go a little bit more brown. But
Hmm.
what you gonna do? Who cares? It's
Yep.
nice. I'll take it for now.
Yep.
Well, happy Wednesday to you. Um, Thank you everybody for your comments, especially you, Randy. You fucking legend. We're gonna hit one of your topics as well today. So the thing we wanted to talk about was. I'll drum roll if you want to go and do it. What was it?
The grand topic of taking a game from concept prototype to on the market pretty much.
I don't
But
know. Yeah, the biggest grandiose thing that could be split up
yeah.
into a 5-part series of everything. But
Exactly. But even we talk about this and we talk about it in chunks, but it's not bad to talk about it with whatever we've learned in recent times, because we're always learning how to do this better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we're just gonna high level some process stuff and kind of walk through the whole thing, rather than deep dive into anything else kind of critical or use much too many examples or anything else like that. So, um, but for the most part, it's gonna just get us to think about it. I think more than anything else. So one of those things where I have a bunch of stuff kind of laying around the place. Obviously, we've gone through the cycle. The cycle is different, you know what I mean, depending on where you are and what you're doing and how you're feeling at the time. So take everything that we say with just a complete grain of salt. You know what I mean? Nothing. It's nice to have a process, but you don't have to stick to a process. And everybody needs to find the path that works for them, and also for their team as well too. I mean, I think this is the big There's a big difference here between the independent game side and the commercial game side. So it's a good thing. So let's talk about it. Do we want to start
Yeah.
from position one, right? The idea.
Yeah, I do want to start with the idea, because I think there's a lot more nuance to it than most people consider. And just to frame this a little bit better, I think we should talk about taking a game idea to eventually the market. Because if you're taking a game idea and just like making a hobby project, do whatever hell you want. Like, really, there's like no rules or no things. Just
No.
just do it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a more interesting and difficult question to think about how to make a marketable game, of course.
Absolutely.
So, with the ideas, I mean, it's interesting because I don't know. There's a lot of different ideas and everyone comes up with ideas in different ways, but I guess like the main advice or my approach is to make sure you're building your tool chest of ideas and also understanding the value of them. Um but by the value of them, I mean like actually look into how much money certain games are making. Like, don't because if you're just relying on instincts and shooting from the hip and thinking like, "Hey, this is fun. Hey, this is fun." Like, listen, I get it, and you should make a game that you're passionate about. But sometimes I think people are really unaware that making this X game, um, they I think they aren't going to be as successful as they think, or so that's really the only thing I want to talk about from the idea front is make sure you're like looking at the market to some degree and have it and building your intuition of how well this set of mechanics might do.
Yeah. Rule number one: know your market. Um,
Yeah,
but I'll go back a little bit more though. To be
hmm
honest,
sure.
I think the first protocol starts higher level than that at your ideation phase is an unfettered ability to allow for ideas, right? I think that
Yes.
there's a different side here, right? There's a higher level thing where it's like, okay, I think it's about the funnel of how you kind of get into the game. So I will start, like, every designer, right, regardless of what you're doing in any industry, right? Whether you're a chef, whether you're a fashion designer, whether you're just, like, I don't know, designing weddings or something like that, right? You should always have just a book. You should always have just a book that you're just writing in. And any little thing that you just like catch out of the air, you throw it into that book. You draw some diagrams, you just get it in there, and you just have a book of ideas that you're constantly kind of just like mulling over, iterating on, jumping back and forth, just any little thing, just tiny little game concepts, right? Tiny anything, just absolutely anything. From there, you can go and say, okay, well, when you're going to say, well, what game am I going to make? There's a couple of different ways I always see it of like how to jump into that funnel. And one is like, I have no ideas, go to my book. Or two, play some games. Get some inspiration from the games that are around you, that you're playing, that you're seeing, things that you like, and then try to take some ideas of like, okay, well, like these are all in the, I'm playing a breadth of different games, but if you get a little focused and say, well, maybe I want to make a strategy game. Oh, okay, well, what are some nice strategy games that are out on the market right now? Well, let's go play those. Okay, great. Well, we've gotten in now. We've played like 3 months of these games. We've broken them down. Now we got to go and look at them objectively, play them, but then really look at them objectively. What's their funnel into the project, right? What's that FATUI, that first time user experience, look like? How complex is their game? How much onboarding do they have to have those mechanics there? What's the community saying about those games? Is there modding support? Is there a technical side of the game systems that they all kind of share? And from there you can kind of go and start breaking a breath of like, what do all of these games share within their space? And then what makes them unique within their space? As those like outer bubbles and bigger bubbles. And I think then you can start getting an idea of what are the games in the market and then start looking at, okay, well, what are the financials of those things? How did those games companies go about marketing those games? How did they get those games like built up over time and scale to like where they are, to the fact that you went and saw them on on any marketplace and like actually went and said, I'm gonna buy that. Um, to me, I think that
Oh,
there's, yeah. Go on. Sorry, I'm just
oh,
fucking.
I want to jump with that because you're definitely right. You should be looking at the games and also considering like their weaknesses as well, so your pros and cons. Because I've heard a really good statement about what competitive edge is, and I've been spouting it a lot lately, which is what secret do you know about X that
Hmm.
other people don't know? So like you're building up your ingredient list of game mechanics, and then you look at strategy games, and then you got to think, what secret do I know about strategy games that other people don't?
Yeah.
And that's probably what you're gonna like put into the mix to try to hit the market and tackle something that nobody else is. And that's how you get your competitive edge and actually stand out, because standing out super important.
I guess there's something there as well too. Like, do you build games that you know, or do you build games that you don't know as an exploration to kind of break the mold of things. You know,
Uh,
because like I would say, like if I was going to build a survival strategy game, it's like, well, yeah, but I've done a lot of outdoorsy stuff over the years, and I've got a lot of outdoorsy friends, and I've you know enjoyed that. I enjoy that lifestyle. So how do I know some things that I can bring to the table there for sure, and like craft an experience around the ambience or something like that of the sounds, or what it means to like even like things like if you're a fisherman and then you build a fishing game, it's like you're probably going to go and throw something in there that is a little bit more very indicative to fishing or something that you might do within your own lifestyle. But then after time it's like, well, there's a line of realism there, right? That you're gonna play with, and accessibility, and kind of hardcoreness sometimes. That especially in just the example that I'm kind of talking about, like, oh, you like fishing, so you're gonna make it a lot more like fishing than you will like something else, right? Or more gamified or anything else like that too. So I think there's pros and cons to everything, but I don't know. You mean, is it better? Is there not better or worse, but like, is it okay to make a game on something that you don't know, a topic that you don't really know?
that's a really that definitely resonates with me like perfectly because I love idle games. So then when I decided to tackle a fishing game, I threw in a bunch of idle game mechanics. So I think it's absolutely fine because that's your artist's lens. This is what you know, and you're like, you know what? I think I could combine what I know with this untapped genre and create something new. So I think
Absolutely,
it's totally okay.
absolutely. So how do you then go and evaluate and say, all right, we got a bunch of ideas. I've played a bunch of games. There's markets here. How do you go and then in your own mind, Calvin, go and direct yourself and say, okay, this is at least the game that I want to make, or at least I want to make something in this genre.
Man, that is a really hard question. And I know there's lots of people that often have like hundreds of ideas and they have to filter out to one.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can give like a really short answer to that other than thinking about your position in life and your goals. Like, do you have 6 month runway? Do you have 3 years? Like, what do you want to tackle and what do you want to learn? It's a really complicated question for sure. So I can't really say an easy answer other than a really deep analysis. Do you have any insight on that?
yeah, you're totally. I love the what you're saying. You mean resources matter, time matters. For me, an older game developer, not older, is do you mean, but a old friend of mine told me something that's always resonated with me like really hardcore, um, and it was just very simple. If you look at your list of ideas, right? What emotionally pulls you more than anything else? Like when you objectively try to play it in your mind, like any of the games that you have on paper, what is the thing that goes and like pulls you the most? Like what's the one that you want to build the most? Like what's that seed of a mechanic that you want to do? But two, and if you find that feeling and you can find that in things, and we see that all the time, like emotionality will drag us in a way. Just go in that direction. Just go in that direction. Don't think about it too much. Just go. See where you end up. You don't know where you want to be until you kind of get there and then figure out, okay, do we pivot back from here or was there a seed of something? And we saw a little bit of this when we were talking to Ryan. Ryan was building up things a little bit at a time. I want to work on this thing over here, but it was all based around Ryan's kind of brand, and was all building into something. I don't know if Ryan really knows where all of that's going. Well, I don't know where any of that's going, but it excited me because I saw there was a seed of something that was building into something, and even though it felt very dispersed at times, but it wasn't. Something is coming out from all of that, and I think that that's cool. That doesn't get you market clarity, doesn't put you in a positionality of anything else, but I think it puts you more on the independent side, which is, okay, how do I just make a game? how do I actually just make something that I want to make, that I want to make, that I know I want to make, and maybe you don't know you want to make it, but maybe you get into it a little bit more and you figure out, do you want to make it or do you not want to make it? I don't think you have to make the decision of, this is the game and I'm going to sit here for 6 months, and 2 years, 3 years, and I'm going to make this. It's like, you're not there yet. You're not. You're just not. So
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of other steps to go into. Um,
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Because there's all these factors like market potential, but also your motive. Okay, I know everyone, especially at the start, is going to be feel like their max motivation and they can handle certain things. But sometimes when it after maybe even a couple years of working on something, yeah, you can and will drag on something. So
it will
if you do
happen.
choose the one that you're most emotionally driven to, that can take the motivation hits easiest. So that's another factor to factor in.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
Connect yourself to something, and if you ground yourself in something, you'll do your best work. In my opinion, you'll do some of your best work. If you're close to the subject matter and you're able to take something of yourself and really put it into the project, you'll be able to find better ways to communicate what you're trying to get across. Which is like, in my opinion, the independent side sometimes is like, the best games are ones that drive a little part of ourselves into the projects. They become a little bit too real, a little bit too close to the edge. Just look at Fez, you know what I mean? Um, that was, Phil Fish captured me in, in just seeing, seeing what it meant, to build that game. Um, but I'll go back though, right? To me, I think that that's a lot of like the independent side. I'm gonna try to build up or bring up a link, real quick.
Yeah, I'm nodding along, but I'm always hesitant because because just going with like your gut, like what drives you, isn't always the best commercially. So
Yeah,
I
yeah, and that's where we're gonna get into some of this. So on the side then of the commercial side, this is where I think that you need to look at your market share, right? This is where we get into the real numbers, right? This is where we start going saying, okay, out of all the games that I want to make, I can go very independent and very self-reliant, and I can really pay attention or really just make whatever the fuck I want to make and hope that it works. And I'm an indie darling, and I'm really just making what I want to make, and that's fine. It's totally fine. The other side of this, though, too, is understanding your market share. What are your revenue potentials? And what are the actual like places where you can have break-in hits? So this is a pitch deck for a really old one as well, too, for Shelter Game Story, a mobile game that I worked on for like 3.5 years. I built a full breakdown of like the casual puzzle game market so we could try and find a hole for this thing, so I could also redirect what companion mechanic would go along with dogs, shelters, and getting dogs, using, basically designing the base, or what was the moment to moment gameplay for this game, right? And how would we enter into the market? So, very quickly, right? We're looking at the puzzle game genre from a very quick glance. Deconstructor of Fun 2021 predictions. Loads of pictures. Sensor Tower puts out all of this information as well too. Go to the sources. Go look online. Get into the data. Find the free versions. Sensor Tower, Game Refinery, Data.io, which used to be App Annie, or Data.ai now, I think it is actually. Try and get accounts for these things. Do everything you can to try and jump into these things and get in. Watch videos. Pay attention to the markets. Look at what's top grossing on your phones, right? But anyway, get into it. Casual market by itself, 9.8 billion, 36% up for the year. Great, awesome. Break those categories down, because there's loads of different categories. There's ways that we define who's making the real genres, right? Merge in puzzle categories, up 104%. Well, hey, up 104%. But then what games have gone into those things? Merge Dragons was in at this time, okay? So now we're talking about fast follows. Now we're talking about how many other games are going to enter into that market on top of that. That's a saturated point. We can't go that way anymore. You have a 3-year runway, you're going to hit a 6-year tail. You're going to be at the end of when players are going to be fatigued with that mechanic. Do not make a game for that point. You've missed your window, you're done. Trivia up 21%. Well, hey, maybe that's the case, you know what I mean? But trivia is a weird one, and it's a very niche market, so, you know, and it's not very specific to a lot of different things, so probably not the way to go. So we get into kind of the bigger stuff. Classic Match 3 is only up 5%, but it's a $1.4 billion market. All the big players are here. King is here. Fucking, Empires and Puzzles is here with their, even mid-core games are even sitting in here, right? Everybody wants to go to Classic Match 3. Kitten Match came out during this time as well, too, in 2019. Big area, but that means big players, which means big money, which means big UA. To actually get those users in, you're going to be spending more money in your marketing later on to actually get them there. So we look at some of these other things. Puzzle and Decorate up 57%, but Bubble Shooter up 25%, but a very small market share, 143 million, but it's up 25%. So now I can go and look at this and say, great, well, hey, Puzzle and Decorate is up 57%, and that's a bit of so that's an emergent market that's been pumped into in the same way that we're trying to identify, some of these other things. But Bubble Shooter is a very big market, in terms of very big brand recognition in terms of the game mechanic, but it seems very small, it's much more small than the other ones. So maybe then there's a hole there. Hole, dogs, Bubble Shooter, Puzzle and Decorate, big trifecta there. What is the Puzzle and Decorate games? Homescapes, Gardenscapes. Well, a lot of Playtika games. So is that really your only major big competition in that space? Kinda, maybe. Especially on the big side, you can kind of look if you know that market and you know that market share and you know who's making games on that side and you've played those games and had a little bit of a go. Uh, Project Runway gets an emergence there. Kitten Match gets an emergence there. They both come out within almost the same year of themselves, 2019, 2020. So we're right there in this at this center point of, okay, well, this could be primary Bubble Shooter as the main driver and sit myself there with some Match and Decorate because people seem to like that, and so we can get some crossover from there. 2 new emerging games into that space and only one big player rather than all big players sitting in one space. Maybe that's the direction that we go, right? Make a decision, make a choice, find a hole, and try to hit for it. Now we look at the player motivations. So this was from like a Facebook gaming article from like a while ago as well too. I'm probably not gonna make that work. Whoops. Here, I'm just gonna mess myself over by doing that. So, puzzle game motivations. Again, just looking out into the resources, sign up for newsletters, just get them all, just get data, filter it all. You, as a designer, you're a data synthesizer. You're taking in things and then being able to synthesize that data into a reasonable thing. You're an analyzer. You take in stuff and you break it down. 32% of players want to learn something. 31% of players want to be immersed in their characters or their world. Only 17 to 22% actually feel like that there are that games in this category deliver on this market. So it's like, okay, great. We're going to now let's teach the players about something that can benefit them outside of their world, right? Let's hit on that player motivation. Let's drive into that because that's going to be a grippy thing. That's going to be the sticky icky. That's going to be the thing that's going to try to center them into that world, hold them there in your game, and keep pushing you from strength to strength to strength and keep them there. Especially when we're going to really push the immersion side of everything else like that too. So custom avatars, story driven, make sure that that story is driven around learning and something that they can take into the real world. So teach them something within that thing. So content design gets now a little bit more directed. Okay, now we know how we want to go and do all of that. Do we go heavy? Now we've looked at bubble pop as a genre and we've looked at the benefits of it. What are the games that are in that market right now? There's exclusively bubble pop games and they do pretty good overall, top grossing, they're doing great. And then there's ones that already include story and narrative because we've defined, hey, we need to teach people stuff, we need to immerse them. So what are the games that are doing that? Panda Pop came out in 2014. Bubble Witch Saga came out in 2016. Kitten Match came out in 2019. And mind you, this was 2 years after this game was this game came out, and then we made the deck 2 years later. But so you can see the kind of revenue differences here. These two games are huge, but guess what? They're now legacy games. 2014 and 2016. These came out a long time ago. Players are going to already be falling off these experiences. So, is that an emergent hole? Are those games on the decline? And then we can come in and start trying to take a market share there. And now we can say as an independent, great, maybe I can find a hole to be able to go and like pull users that are already wandering from those products over into my own. Year one target breakdowns. Okay, great. Let's tier them out. Who are the top players within this thing? Playtrex, Playtika, King, Fallout Shelter was a big one. Just, you know what I mean? Just genuinely, there's like a weird off the wall game that's just done well within that space. Panda Pop, Jam City, you know what I mean? These are all the big games. But who are the shitty games in your market? If you know who you are as an independent developer and you're like, okay, well, I'm not really going to have the UA spend. I can't play up here. I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm one person. I'm 6 people. I'm 7 people. I'm not going to be able to do that. So what are in my tiers? Are they making money? Are they making anything at all? Well, Pet Vet Doctor Dogs, you know, lifetime gross made 344,000 in 2-3 years. But look at that fucking App Store icon. We can do better than that. A Tamagotchi game made this. Dogtown Pet Simulator. Look how crap this thing looks. But they still made a little bit of cash. So, what can I garner from this? The games that are in these sides, people want to be playing with animals. They want to be playing in pet shelters. They want to spend money within these apps because they even spend money in shitty apps that don't have any real great gameplay, that were really nasty on the art side. So players want to be in that space, but there's nothing fulfilling that market share for them right now. So great, awesome. How do we go and take all of their lunch, push us up into that tier 2, in tier 2, tier 3 section for year 1? Can I seem to hit into there with a little bit better of an art style? Why can't we hit to that side? We just said. Where do we want to position? Now, this is something that I do a lot when I'm just trying to analyze games and ideas and like where do I want to sit. So, do we want to be managing? We want to be a pet simulator game, but do we want to be managing one pet or many pets? Do we want to be more simulation management or do we want to be more puzzle? Because remember, we said we're bubble pop plus a little bit of other stuff. Kitten Match is very much like puzzle, not sim management. Right, we're not managing needs. We're not managing, does this character need to go to the toilet like a Tamagotchi or anything else like that, right? One pet, where it's very simulation management. So we want to be a little bit more puzzle, and we want to be a little bit more on the kind of like, in that in-between of loads of pets to one pet. And how do we want to sit there? And then, what's the real win? Well, for this game, centralized tech. So we already had access to loads of different art assets, not just dogs. We had access to cats, to bunnies, to horses, to reptiles. So, so let's make some centralized tech. Do it with dogs, correct? Just like how Playtika or Playtrex does it. They made Homescapes. That's one game. They make that successful. Then they clone it, make Wildscapes. Take the same thing, new art style, a little bit slight different gameplay, throw it out there. Next year, they're on Gardenscapes, doing the exact same thing, taking it, putting it out there, getting it out into the wild. So, and then also, what are the failed games from the big companies? Was a beautiful game that came from one of these big companies that also then didn't seem to match up revenue wise. 8.4 million versus 86 million. Why did Wildscapes fail? Well, Wildscapes failed because it was a pet zoo. People don't want to be having animals, especially wild animals, in a pet zoo.
Man, that was my favorite of the scapes too. I was bitter.
Yeah, so
Go on.
all of a sudden, instantly, you go and say, oh shit, animals in cages, not good. Animals being rehabilitated, okay. So we have to get them out. We have to not keep them in cages. We have to get them into a position where these animals can be free, that they can live their lives, and that they can do things within all of those spaces. So, as you can see, this is just like a quick, very breakdown of everything else. But there's a lot more data that goes into the background of this that obviously then ends up happening that gets you into that position and that mindset of what is the game I'm making? How do I make an assumption, because this is not real? How do I just make a starting assumption that I can find a hole in a market to drive my gameplay through? I have an idea of what I want. I want to have dogs and dog shelters and blah 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 and all of these things. Okay, what's the vector of gameplay that's going to drive you into a market? Where are you going to be centered? And then how are you going to build from there to be successful within that market? And
Yeah.
making clear goals around all of those things.
Yeah, and I like your key word there, which was assumption, because that's kind of what the you know it. I I use a similar word, hypothesis. It's like, what's your hypothesis? What do you think is gonna work in this market that isn't necessarily done? And yeah, market research, that's one way. And even if you are just indie, you should always take a look. Know a little bit of numbers. Um, and yeah, and the alternative, of course, is to prototype, because let's say you have a wild idea that doesn't exist on any of these charts. Then of course, you can either risk it and gamble. Like maybe you can do that, maybe. But prototypes, another way to get information is this thing something, a secret that nobody else knows? Let's prototype it and check it with friends, like bare minimum,
Yep, I think
and
that
and get
that's the next
get the
play.
reaction. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the next place where you go. You know,
yeah,
after you have all this, now you have it something. You know, kind of where you want to be. You got to build something. Now you got to play it, and there's plenty of different ways to do that. Plenty of different ways. Um, Talk to me about different ways that you end up prototyping your gameplay.
I you know I the, I do want to do that, but one thing that always has is in my mind. I'm gonna say this, and every 90% of indies are gonna hate me right now for saying this. When somebody pitches me a narrative game, I get really nervous.
Sure.
When they say, I want to do X, but it's going to have a story. I am very skeptical almost immediately. And to cite a recent talk was the Marvel Snap talk at GDC this year. He was like, "You either got to have the best story in the world, or none at all." And I personally am inclined to agree. I want to hear your take after, but
Mobile's
uh,
different, and I think,
yeah,
but you're going for an audience segment that you know
yeah.
wants something
So,
there.
in my mind, it's like, okay, so you're saying your narrative is going to be your unique selling point. So how do you should you prototype that? How do you prototype that? Because I do not see indie people prototyping their narrative. They make the game and then they slap on the story later and they're like, "This is what are you talking about? This is the best story ever. Of course it's going to be great." And I'm like, "Oh no, man, your game is in trouble." So I actually want to start the conversation there, because I see this more than anything else is the narrative game pitch, or X genre with story on top.
There's
Should
always
you
story.
prototype the story? Is it okay to not have a great story? Like, what do you think on there?
What are people playing? I mean, that's the thing that I always say that you got to ask yourself. What are people playing? Like
Well,
in
that
your game, right? What's the part that people are playing,
mm,
right? Are they playing the story? Is it Doki Doki Literature Club? Because narrative stories sell. You know, they do sell. It's just that
fr-
you have to have the game set up for that. Detroit
from
Beyond Human, story driven game, but you have to know like is that's your audience segment and that's what you're aiming for, and you know that you can deliver on that in an interesting way, right? So like, are people playing the story, or is story just the driver of narrative to get the player from A to B?
in almost every case is usually the driver from A to B, and usually the gameplay is more common.
Yeah.
Like
So
just a Metroidvania or
so
whatever.
then the biggest thing is you got to just be prototyping your general gameplay, and your story is kind of tacked on. But your story does have to be good, but it's part of that, not to go back to another GDC talk, but what is that one that's like 50 things that I hate about your game pitch?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
that's like number one. It's like, I don't give a shit about your story. It's like,
yeah.
just don't talk about your story. Like, everybody wants to talk about their narrative and stuff like that, but guess what? I mean, I don't think that many people care about it at all.
Usually
Um,
not.
you have to set your game up for success if you're going to be a true narrative as a driver game. Players are going to have to play your narrative, which means that it's going to be a big integration point, and you have to do some stuff to also keep them there. Having skip buttons for all of your narrative is probably not a good idea if you're a narrative driven game.
Yeah.
You know, you
Wow.
shouldn't.
So,
Yeah, you
oh,
shouldn't have any of those things. It,
okay. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a problem. So, like, you just don't think we should or could prototype the narrative side of things, just like kind of hope for the best, and then play test at the very end once it's all in.
again, it's what are you playing? So
For
to me,
a narrative driven
oh, for a narrative,
normal
yeah,
game.
so a narrative driven game, then you have to be prototyping and figuring out how do players navigate your narrative, right? You have to also then refine your story over time. So you have to start off with your loose concept and be able to be okay with throwing out version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, rewriting a shit ton. You want to be writing a novel at the end of this whole thing, and
Yeah.
be positioned to do that. You can't just go and write it once and say that's it, we're done. You got to go and look at how are people navigating this. Is this a negative point in your story? What do people care? Do people care about this? Because it's got to be as gripping as a Stephen King novel, which I don't think is that gripping personally. Fuck off. The movies are
Oof.
better than the books, but fuck all of you people.
It seems
But
hard to prototype this sort of game then because you need a lot of things in place, or maybe a written story and get people to read it.
I think it's a lot easier. There's better narrative
Oh, really?
tools. Oh
Okay.
shit, dude! There's so many.
Well, no.
Drag and drop. You know what I mean? Node based Unity tools that
Yeah.
you can just whip off of the App Store right now and just
Well,
throw
that's
into your
great,
game.
but it seems like nobody's doing this from what I've seen. It just seems like people just go all in on their story.
But that's why I say is what are you playing? Because
Yeah.
where I see people do that is when it's not actually part of the gameplay. It's the driver of why are we here, right? And these are important things, right, for the player. They have to be centered into a world, especially when you're trying to immerse themselves into something, conflict or whatever, right? But there's an it's an onion by itself. So there's deeper layers of all of these things, and can you drive a deeper meaning? Can you drive a deeper understanding? What are the overall theme, emotional sides of things that we're trying to communicate to the player? I will always go back to what's the emotionality of what I'm trying to do. What's the tonality of trying to do? Not necessarily what is the exact content of the line, but how does the line drive the player into the emotionality and set that dial in their own head to be like, oh, how do I emotionally connect that player in this moment to a dying character in a real way? Well, what was the build up to that point? What was the player playing to get to there? And it's not about necessarily the story beats that got them to there, but what was actually the play? What was the driver? And a lot of the times I see it, it's just what I think what you're kind of talking about is just like, yeah, I have this RPG, this that's like Final Fantasy VII, and it's Octopath Traveler meets blah 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 blah, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, but the travel and the gameplay that got them to there and the visuals and all the other things, that was the actual driver.
Hmm.
The story was only just like a way of a narrative transition to like, why am I here? What am I doing? Oh, I'm fighting this
Yeah.
big boss. Oh, okay, cool. Well, it's all emotions. So how do I drive you into the emotional side of things, not necessarily the actual content, because I might not read all the content. But you missed the one slide that mattered. There's 5 panels in this little text box, and you press A through every one of them. How are you ever gonna? It's like, if your entire game relies that one person read one line of a text box at one point in your game, and everything's a house of cards to that one thing, you fucked up, dude. You know what I mean? You really fucked up. So
Yeah.
I think it's just bigger. It's bigger. It's out of the world a little bit more. You gotta, if you know, what's the core? What's your core? What's the thing that's actually the thing that players are playing? That's why I say moment to moment gameplay is the bit that players are playing right now. They're always engaged or hyper engaged. This is more mobile focused. Outside of that loop, then you have your metagame systems. What are your markets? What is your economy? How do people drive into live operations events, if there are any, or just like random occurrences or random spots? And then kind of go from there. You know what I mean? So, like, core gameplay of a FPS game is the shooting. How do I make the shooting crispy? What am I really trying to drive there? Not the story. Don't matter about the story. Doom 2 ended with you rescuing a bunny rabbit from fucking planet Mars. Like, Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? It don't matter. Doesn't matter.
Right. Right. So okay, no, that's sheds light on what I was thinking about. But to go all the way back and answer your question about prototypes. Now we've all probably consumed media about prototype. Hey, be quick, blah blah blah. So I just try to give like two different angles that people
Do
don't
it.
bring up often. The first thing is your prototype should focus on answering questions, the
Yes.
biggest questions that you have in mind, because those are the biggest risks in your mind. So if you are making a fighting game, but it has a unique mechanic, that's the big question. Like you can always make a cool fighting game, but it's just gonna take so long. So if you can just isolate that one part as your very first prototype, do that first. Obviously, if you have enough time, sure, answer all the questions, but everything is tied to time. So you should be making prototypes and sequencing them to answer the biggest questions first, and then the next biggest question, and stuff like that. But the other the other second point I want to say is be very careful about the audience um, that you are sending your prototypes to, in the sense that if you are playtesting with just your like absolute closest friends that you talk to the most, you can have squares and circles. Or if they're really keen on game design. Because if you have a bare bones prototype and you give it to somebody who's used to playing AAA games, they will give you very bad feedback
Which
because
is
they can't
different.
handle. Yeah, well,
Just different.
maybe because I would say if you spend the extra 2 months to polish it up and then send it to these people, they'll give you better feedback. So I, I'm just saying, I guess I'm saying, figure out which of your friends are good at analyzing games, and then if they're not great at analysis, I think they're good for later iterations where you have graphics and stuff in, because it will pollute their analytical abilities. Of like, this game sucks, but really they're saying I don't understand what I'm doing because of these circles and squares.
Yeah.
So those are my two pieces of advice for
Yeah.
prototyping.
No, totally. You have to know your audience here in terms of who you're actually showing this shit to, because there are so many people who can't abstract through the bugs. They can't abstract
Bugs,
through
exactly.
through the little
Yeah,
things of like debug UI.
yeah.
They can't get a sense of a game and then be like, okay, throw all of this other stuff out. I can imagine something around this. This
Yep.
is what I'm actually doing. Is there anything crunchy here? And
I gotta jump in. Because
yeah.
you just hit on something.
Go for it.
The, you'll ask somebody to, hey, give me your thoughts on this game. Ignore the bugs. And then their only feedback will be all the bugs. And I'm like, yes, I didn't implement that yet. So you gotta figure out where in this funnel these guys lie.
Yeah, yeah. And you can tune some people out here, you know? You can really tune some people out here. You'll kind of figure out, go to your peers. I always say go to your peers. Like, don't be so afraid to, I mean, I think that there's also just like, don't be afraid to show your game. Don't be afraid to show shit, like objective shit. Just don't necessarily just have it on paper. But if you're gonna go to somebody and like have something playable, even if it's just the smallest little thing that's dinky and crap and has nothing, it's X's and O's, whatever. Don't be afraid to fucking show it off.
Yep.
Because there's too many people out there that are so, oh, my precious, oh, they're gonna steal my idea. Like, oh, it's like, dude, don't even fucking worry about it. You're already ahead of them and they got their own fucking shit that they're trying to do. So, collaborate.
You know them personally.
Yeah.
Like, they're probably not going to steal something if you interact with them on a daily basis.
Yeah. So collaborate with people. You got to find your group here and collaborate with them. Friends and family will help, but you're at the game development stage, so you need kind of game developers. I don't find that artists are necessarily the best people to talk to at those times as well too. But again, it really depends on can that individual abstract away from everything else that's in front of them and kind of like see it, a little bit. And if they can't see it, then figure out why and try to iterate from there. And maybe if the game is too rough, there is a point where it is too rough. You're going to be the only one who's going to be able to abstract into that thing and say like, hey, other me, is this fun?
Exactly.
Is this fun? Objectively. Don't fucking lie to yourself. I see you out there. I see you out there lying to yourself. Is this fun? Because if it's not, figure it out. You gotta have, like, when you're doing these types of things, there's also points where you have to say, what's called the gates process, right? So you're going through the gates, okay? You're going through the ideation phase and you're generating a lot of ideas, then refining those down. Then you're saying, from those ones that I've refined down, okay, what are the ones that can have general success? Refine that list down even more. If you look it up, it's called the double diamond process. But that's the in-between of the gates. Then to say, okay, go, no go. Do I make this? Go, no go. Okay, we make this. It's checked all of my boxes. It's hit my criteria. I've set up all of this filtering system beforehand. Go, no go, do I make this prototype? Great, go. Make this prototype, then make it. And now have next goals. Okay, what's the filter then from here? I have a lot of different ideas of what this could be. Make. Filter them out. Which are the ones that I like? Which are the ones that I don't like? Start on paper. Don't go straight to code sometimes, in my opinion. I think start on paper is the best way possible.
Yeah. If it's paper prototypable, that's gonna save you a lot of time.
It's gonna save you a lot of time. Make it dirty. Here's like one I did for like a stupid board game like way back in the day, right? 2 pieces of fucking A4 paper that is taped together, post-it notes with rules on them. Just draw, use whiteboard marker, throw it on, and then guess what? Over time, take that, poster board it. Now all of a sudden I have something. Now all of a sudden I have a place for all of those things to go. Now I have a reason for it to exist. Once you get into that position, you've moved it on down a little bit more down the line. Make it dirty, make it quick, go from there. At some point make it shareable. But that's like a different story as well too, I think.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think we touch on everything for prototype. Hey, we might answer this question from end to end. The last part of the question is how do you get from prototype to table? And I don't actually know how to begin answering this, but I will say one thing, which is whatever code you had for the prototype, you might have to throw it out.
Yeah, be okay
So
with that.
yeah, because the point of the prototype is super rapid iteration. So only now should you be making solid reusable code.
Yeah.
So I'd start with that idea.
Yeah, on the so like there's some sides here then too on the commercial side, right? Which is you need to start finding now that you've like kind of found some gameplay, right, and you have an idea of what that gameplay is, you might want to spend some money to start doing art tests. Finding an artist to really start leveling up your game a little bit. Just getting you some assets. Getting you some animations, getting you some things. Maybe that's buying some asset packs, maybe that's buying something else, but you should get something. The big reason here is that what we're going to do is we're going to go on the commercial side specifically. Again, bigger money, bigger budgets, bigger people, a lot more things. We need to be more cognizant of what we actually have. On mobile, we need to know what our UA spend is, what our user acquisition spend is. This is our cost per install, our cost per acquisition, and try to figure out in our funnel, in our idea, will players actually go and buy and download this game? So what people are doing these days is they are making fake game trailers, making what's called the 5 panel, which is those 5 panels of images that you will see on either iOS or on Android on Google Play Store. Build fake stores with pre-order buttons, and then put those ads out and do some UA spending against into the world on Instagram, Facebook, whatever whatever you're like. What you're trying to do is drive traffic to that page, and then for a very clear amount of spend, let's say $100, $150, what does your funnel look like for that analytically, right? From your video, what was the click-through rate of the video, right? So how many people saw the ad, clicked into it, went to the page? How many people then from getting to the page then actually clicked the pre-order button so that they, when that game comes out, that it will be on their device? From here you can see a little bit more objectively if you do that a couple of times with a couple of different slices of gameplay based on of your either the way that you're trying to communicate your design, the art style that you're trying to use for this game, or more importantly, the different types of ideas you have for your game, right? Maybe it's strategic base building. There's 100 different ways you could do that. And maybe you've prototyped out a few different ones and you kind of like a few, but you still have a couple of other ideas that you can't necessarily build every one of them, right? You have too many ideas and you can't build every one of them. Well, this is a refining lens for that. Build these videos, then as like low fidelity things, then that funneling process will help you to tell, okay, which is the one is resonating in market the most. Be very cognizant that art style is the biggest primary driver of sales in our industry. Okay? You can't just have shitty art all the time and just expect it all just to work. What did you call it last week? It
Uh,
was off camera when we were talking about Batsu, and you call it it's shelf sale or whatever it is.
I'm not. Oh! Curb appeal?
Curb appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? This is your curb appeal. When people are just looking around the store and they're just looking around, okay? What's going to drive them to say, I'm going to click on your App Store icon versus this other one, versus this other one, versus this 10 other ones that are in the same category as you? You have to find that somewhere. You have to find that kind of early on. Gameplay matters, right? But find the fucking art style and find some artist or something that's going to like drive and inspire you, because you might also be inspired by the art style to change up your gameplay to match some of the art style itself as well too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And leaning into it a little bit more might help you really well. What was that? It was like that indie game. It was like all about skateboarding, and you were a skateboarder made of glass or whatever. And it was like, oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
you know what I mean,
Yeah.
you fall and you break and you explode into
Yeah.
a million different pieces. But I mean, the way everything shimmers and moves around the place and everything else like that, that's extremely important. But how are you going to say, if I don't even know your game, I'm going to pick up this box versus I'm going to pick up another box? It's like, it has to be visually appealing. There has to be something here that fucking drives me into this.
And same with theme, actually. Like the theme you choose, if you're like, oh, you know what, maybe people don't want to play as ballerinas, they want to play as space marines. That's going to change your gameplay too.
Yep.
So
Go look at Google keywords. I think if you just actually Google keywords, you'll find a tool from Google that allows you to kind of like send them a link and put in a bunch of keywords for basically what your SEO would be, your search engine optimization, right? All of your tags, and then it will tell you what is like the most searched terms based off of those tags, and it will tell you by like the thousands to the millies, and then also tell you what the CPI is, or basically what the cost to buy ads in that space is. So you can kind of help to drive yourself and say, okay, well, what are the current themes within the world, and help to refine your game kind of around all of those stuff as well too.
yeah.
Um, I don't know, and then you can, again, if you're indie, do whatever the fuck you want, I guess. Uh, you know, my
Yeah.
life of Pedro, I probably wasn't looking up like fucking banana,
Yeah.
shooter simulator, but Serious Sam used to be a really big game, and making more of a Matrixy style Serious Sam was something that has never really been done. So okay, great. Can we? That seems like simple enough gameplay, something that's very engaging, more physicsy based as well too, leaning into the engine, doing a lot of like not a lot of like coding off of yourself, kind of taking that and putting it into the engine. So it's like, okay, great. Like maybe we can find something there that works, right? What are older games that have kind of fizzled out that nobody has been able to build on top of, or nobody's really entered that space again? And a lot of that is just playing games and knowing the market and everything else. I know that's back to the ideation phase, but I don't think it is.
No,
It's like,
no, no, no. It's fine to go full circle. I was just thinking about this because, we're coming to the end of this whole, our description of our process. And I
yeah,
realized, so, Randy basically asked, how do you guys approach this? And both me and Sean have the same idea of constantly reducing risk.
yes,
Every single thing we have said is reducing risk. So I'll offer an analogy. So My Life as Pedro or the Vampire Survivors game. The guy, they basically, so you're in a car, and they basically picked the general direction with the knowledge they had. Like the Vampire Survivors guy, he played Magic Survival, and he worked in the slot machine industry, so he had like some idea. He's like, this might work.
core
Now imagine,
emotions. What's the big
yeah,
drivers? Yeah,
yeah,
payouts,
yeah,
money moments, big numbers, big wins, big
yep.
spends. Okay.
So he had a little bit. So imagine yourself in a car, and imagine there's fog. It's a very foggy day. He picked a direction, and he just like slammed on the gas, and he just went in a direction, and he got lucky. Same with most unicorns or most one-hit wonders do this, and you'll see this all the time. Well, I'm sorry, you won't see this all the time, but you'll see one-hit wonders that make a lot. Don't follow that methodology. They're one-hit wonders, and they're extremely rare. They're called unicorns for a reason. But a person who, and this isn't just games. This is business. Any smart business will hit the gas and maybe not. They won't be that careful because your gas costs money. They'll step on the pedals, and they'll keep uncovering the fog. They'll keep like prototyping, doing market research, and they will figure out they can see the direction to turn their car and pivot into success. So that's the correct way to do a business is reduce risk and figure out the right way. Be very careful about slamming the gas and just going with a direction. Again, unless there's nothing on the line. I mean, if you just love games, you're passionate, and you don't have people working under you, so you don't have payroll to worry about. I mean, yeah,
Or you have that idea,
slam it.
or you're just
Yeah,
like very
yeah,
confident you have something, you have an
exactly,
idea that you're doing. Like
exactly.
then maybe don't do this, but
Mhm.
iterate. just iterate. You just make sure that
Yeah.
you're iterating on
Look
something.
through the fog a little
Look
bit.
through,
Like
yeah. I call it the cone of uncertainty,
yeah,
right? Where
yeah,
it's like you're
thanks.
standing at the top of the funnel of everything that could be, and every layer that you go down into that cone is a compounding factor of all of the things that you don't know from the layer above, multiplied by the layer above, multiplied by the layer above. The more layers that you can see down and the more answers that you can have to questions that are from above, the less that math gets way the fuck out of hand of all of the things that could be and could not be by the bottom of that funnel. And you won't be able to see between your head and your tail at that point, if you're at the very top of the funnel. But being able to answer some questions as you're looking down the funnel will help to reduce what that math equation is at the bottom. And it's just important for me to always like have that kind of mindset
Yeah.
of everything that's going on there. So,
Yep.
and don't
Uh,
always feel like you can throw shit out. Don't get married to your idea. Don't get married to the one thing that you're making. You have to, again, use the gates process. If the prototypes are in that position where people are playing them and they don't like them, you're losing motivation on that idea. Maybe that's a moment to go and say, do I pivot the gameplay, or what is working, what's not working? Okay, my gameplay idea is not working. Maybe throw it out. Maybe go back to your ideation board. Maybe you didn't fail. You didn't fail. You built something. You learned something a little new. Now you know that that's not going to work. We're going to try something else. Maybe you spent too long. Maybe the market's changed. Maybe something else came out. Don't keep doing that, but
I did like what you said about if you really are confident and have something deep down that you believe in, and you're willing to drive through the most foggy of routes, then yeah, I mean you can go for it because that will likely be a total blue ocean with no other competitors because nobody has paved the way before.
yeah.
Again, only do that if you think you can, but it is possible.
Yeah, or I mean, just fin- at the end of the day, just fucking finish something.
There you go.
I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Okay, so this is gets us up to prototypes, iteration, and everything else like that. Now we need to go and say, okay, we're locked in. We have something. We have a seed of something. We're ready to go.
Hit the
Um,
gas.
hit the gas. Move down this block. It is now almost 9. Do we want to kind of save this part for later on?
Yeah,
For like
definitely.
us then do a two-parter?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Look, we could run through it right now, but I think that also then breaks off like a bunch of other stuff, and if we two-part it right now, then we can go into that production cycle later on. How to actually build in production standards. What are you really trying to do? And then move into, okay, now I'm in a position of marketing or hiring in new people to try and help me, contractors to try and help me to finish these things. And then what's that last 10%? And then also then how do I manage everything else, like the communities and everything else up to that point?
yeah. And I think it'll be good to talk about like how different team sizes might tackle that because you've worked at a lot more companies than I have, so
Yeah.
you can have pretty good insight.
Yeah, I bounced around a lot. All right, but hopefully that gets us about halfway, in my opinion, about halfway
Yeah,
through the thing.
sounds good.
You at this point you should have a clear idea of what you're kind of making, and be in a cycle to be have the tools to be able to build what you want, and then we kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sweet Calvin, that
Great.
was fun. It's always fun
Great
just to
question. Great
driving in.
question.
Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you so much, everybody else. If you like the content, please like and subscribe. If you don't, I don't, tell us why. That's fine with me too.
Throw
Um,
more questions down too. We love answering these.
yeah, because I'm not creative at all, and I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. And also, just if you like this stuff, please share it around. If you have other people, use this as a discussion point. We don't think that this is also. I mean, I'm not married to my ideas. This is just something that, throughout the time of making games for a long period of time, um, this is what I've netted out to. So talking, so if you have different opinions and different ideas, if your friends have different opinions and different ideas, share this. Let's hear what they think. There's different ways to skin a goat, so let's kind of go from there. All right, anything closing, Cal?
No, that's it.
Sick. All right, let's get out of here.
All right.